I visited his grave every week for a year. I brought flowers. I whispered that I was sorry I wasn't braver, and I meant it every single time.
She doesn't have to be sorry anymore. Nobody does. She stood there in the rain, week after week, apologizing for something that was never her fault. And the person who should have been sorry was standing in a boardroom, smiling. My name is Aiden Voss. I was 25 when my adopted brother pushed me off a construction scaffold and watched me fall 7 stories without calling for help. I watched everything after that, as a ghost. I watched him take my father's company. I watched my sister destroy herself with guilt. I watched the only person who ever mourned me stand in the rain at my grave, week after week, saying sorry for something that was never her fault. And then I woke up. 22 years old, morning light, my first day at the company, every memory intact, every betrayal burned into my bones. He has a 3-year plan to steal everything. He has 3 backup plans. But this time, I move first. The question is, when you already know how the story ends, can you write a different one? My name is Aiden Voss. I'm 22 years old, and I already know how I die. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and touched my own face. The jawline that hadn't been broken yet. The eyes that hadn't gone hollow from 3 years of betrayal. The last time I saw this face, I was falling. Nathan's silhouette above me against the sky, wind tearing past, and then nothing, and then everything. I watched as a ghost. I watched Nathan dismantle my father's company piece by piece. I watched my sister Hannah get turned into a weapon against our own family. I watched my father David lowered into the ground. A heart attack, they said. I know better now. And I watched a girl I'd never noticed, a junior architect whose name I never bothered to learn, visit my grave every single week for a year, leaving flowers in the rain, whispering that she was sorry she wasn't braver. Not this time. I remember every lie, every move, every person he broke. I watched it all from the other side, and this time, I see him coming. I got dressed, checked my phone. The date confirmed it. Day 1. Nathan has a 3-year plan to steal everything my father built. He has 3 backup plans I know about, and at least one I don't. But he doesn't know the one thing that changes everything. I've already seen the ending, and I'm rewriting it. Voss Development Group sits on the 32nd floor of a glass tower downtown. My father built it from a single construction crew and a handshake loan 30 years ago. I walked through those doors at 8 a.m., and there he was, Nathan. 25 years old, senior project manager, smile like a knife wrapped in silk. He crossed the lobby, shook my hand, and said, "Welcome to the family business, brother." The last time he called me brother, I was falling, but I'd already made my first move. That morning, before leaving my apartment, I logged into the company's shared drive using my old internship credentials, the ones IT never bothered to deactivate, and there it was. Nathan had already copied my project proposal. 3 months of my work, stolen before my first day even started. In my first life, he presented it as his own and earned a board promotion. This time, I let him steal it. But I swapped one thing, a single structural calculation. A load-bearing figure that looks right at a glance, but doesn't match foundation specifications. The kind of error only a trained structural engineer would catch. Nathan isn't an engineer. He's a project manager who steals from people who are. That evening, Nathan organized a welcome dinner at a restaurant downtown. My father David at the head of the table, my sister Hannah beside him, and one extra guest, a woman Nathan introduced as a friend from university, Vivian. Beautiful, precise, warm in a way that felt rehearsed. In my first life, I fell for her instantly. She became my girlfriend for 2 years, and every word I ever told her, every plan, every fear, every vulnerability, went straight to Nathan. She was his spy, wearing a smile I was too blind to see through. After I died, she moved into the Voss penthouse with Nathan the same month. This time, I smiled back, played my part perfectly. And when Nathan leaned over to whisper something to Vivian during dessert, just a quick shared glance when they thought the rest of us weren't paying attention, I caught it. A look that said they knew each other far better than friends from university. I caught everything. Great dinner, Nathan. Really glad to have the family all together like this. Here's to new beginnings, and to having a brother who makes it all feel like home. He smiled at me from across the table. Warm, brotherly, that same perfect performance I'd watched for 3 years the first time around. He toasted to family. He toasted to new beginnings. And he had absolutely no idea that the game was already over. That night, back in my apartment, I made the most important phone call of my second life. Not to a lawyer, not to the police. To a junior architect at Voss Development, whose name most people in the building didn't even know. Her phone rang 4 times before she picked up.
Hello? I don't recognize this number. It's almost 10 on a weeknight, and I'm fairly certain nobody from that company has ever called me outside of work hours. Who is this?
Sarah, this is Aiden Voss. I need to meet with you tomorrow. Not at the office. Somewhere we can talk privately.
Aiden Voss? The CEO's son? I've worked at that company for over a year, and we've never spoken once. Why would you want to meet with me?
Because you're the only person at that company I trust. Everyone else is either compromised, blind, or playing a game I can't afford to lose. You're the only one who saw the truth and tried to speak it.
That's a very strange thing to say. You don't know me. We've never spoken. Not once in the entire time I've been there. Why would you trust me?
I know about Project Sycamore, the residential tower design that Nathan presented to the board last year. Those were your designs, Sarah. Your plans, your specifications, your name that should have been on every page. And I know what happened when you tried to report it.
How do you know about that? I filed a complaint with HR, and it vanished within a week. Nobody took it seriously. Nobody even looked into it. I've been carrying that for over a year, and no one has ever. How could you possibly know?
Because you tried to tell me once, and I didn't listen. You stood right in front of me with the truth in your hands, and I nodded politely and forgot you existed within a week. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. I'm listening now.
I don't know why I believe you. Maybe because you're the first person who's ever said those words to me out loud. All right, tomorrow. Tell me where and when, and I'll be there.
She agreed, not because she trusted me. She had every reason not to. She agreed because someone finally said the words she'd been carrying alone for over a year. In my first life, Sarah tried to warn me about Nathan. I was standing 3 feet from her desk. I nodded, said something polite, and forgot the conversation existed within a week. I walked past her every single day for 3 years without ever learning her name until I was dead. Until I watched her stand at my grave, week after week, leaving flowers in the rain and whispering that she was sorry she wasn't braver. She had nothing to be sorry for. I was the one who was blind.
But I was done being blind. The week that followed was a chess game played in silence. Every day another piece moved. Every night another file reviewed. I met Sarah the morning after my call. A quick coffee 3 blocks from the office. Just enough to establish what we each had and what we needed. And while we built our case in the shadows, Nathan walked into the boardroom carrying a trap he didn't know was set. 1 week in, full board meeting, 12 members, my father at the head of the table, Nathan at the screen presenting my project proposal under his name. He clicked through the slides, explained structural specifications he barely understood, and then he reached the load-bearing calculation, the one I'd changed. Richard Enfield, retired structural engineer, board member for 20 years, leaned forward and said, "Nathan, this figure doesn't match the foundation specs. Walk us through the methodology." Nathan froze. 3 seconds of silence that felt like 30. He couldn't explain math he'd never done. He blamed a draft version that should have been updated, recovered, barely. The room moved on, but my father didn't. David sat watching Nathan for the rest of that meeting with a look I'd never seen on his face before. The look of a man who just noticed something he'd been choosing not to see. After the meeting, David went back to his office and quietly pulled up every project Nathan had submitted in the past 2 years. He didn't confront anyone. He didn't tell anyone. He just started reading. The first crack. Small, almost invisible, but I saw it, and I knew more were coming. 2 days later, I sat across from Sarah at a cafe far enough from the office that no one from Voss would walk in. She'd brought her laptop and everything she'd kept from Project Sycamore. A year of silence, finally about to break. I have the metadata, original file creation dates, your user ID embedded in the drafts, timestamps proving every version existed on your account months before Nathan presented it to the board. Your design, your work, stolen.
I spent 6 months on that tower. It was the best work I'd ever done. When Nathan presented it as his own, I went straight to HR that same afternoon. They said they'd look into it. A week later, my complaint was deleted from the system, like it never existed. Nobody believed me.
I believe you. Every file, every timestamp, every draft you created. I've seen the proof, and it's undeniable. Your name is going back on that building, Sarah. I promise you that.
What exactly are you planning, Aiden? Because the way you're talking, the evidence, the timeline, the certainty in your voice, this sounds a lot bigger than an HR complaint. This sounds like you're going to war.
I'm building a case. Every project he's stolen, every lie he's told to climb. And when the evidence is ready, I'm going to present it somewhere he can't talk his way out of. She opened her laptop,
For 3 hours, we built the foundation of an evidence file, revision histories, original design metadata, timestamps that made the theft undeniable. By the time she closed her laptop, we had something Nathan could never survive. She still didn't fully trust me, but she trusted the evidence, and that was enough to start. That same week, Nathan started mentoring my sister. He invited Hannah to project meetings, praised her ideas in front of senior staff, made her feel seen, the one thing nobody in our family had ever thought to do for her. In my first life, this was exactly how he turned her into a weapon. He spent months earning her trust, feeding her insecurity, until the day he handed her forged embezzlement documents and she stood up at the board meeting and testified against me, my own sister, his finest manipulation. I couldn't warn Hannah without explaining things I could never explain. So over dinner that night, just the two of us, takeout containers and late television, I planted one seed instead. Hey Hannah, if anyone ever shows you something that makes you doubt our family, documents, messages, anything, promise me you'll come to me first, before anyone else. Before you do anything with it, just come to me. She looked at me, confused by the weight behind such a simple request. Then she shrugged and promised. She had no idea she'd just made the most important promise of her life. Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian circled closer. Coffee invitations, hallway meetings, questions about my projects that felt casual but weren't. In my first life, I told her everything. This time, I fed her exactly what I wanted Nathan to hear. Real project names with shifted details, budgets I was worried about that didn't exist, meetings I was preparing for that would never happen. She carried every word back to Nathan like clockwork, and he built his strategy around information I designed to be wrong. She thought she was his spy. She was my messenger. After one of our coffee meetings, I followed Vivian at a distance. She drove across town to a hotel, the Linden, on Harper Street. Nathan's car was already in the parking garage. I photographed both vehicles, timestamps, plates, everything. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented 3 more visits. Same hotel, same pattern. I caught them leaving through the lobby together once. Nathan's hand on the small of her back, comfortable, familiar, more than university friends. Far more. I stored everything. But while I gathered evidence in the present, while I played the patient strategist and built my case one file at a time, the past was eating me alive. Because I remembered everything. I remembered the board meeting where Hannah, my sister, stood up and read forged numbers from accounts that never existed. I remembered her voice shaking because Nathan had spent months making her believe every word. I remembered the construction site, the scaffold, Nathan's hand resting on my back, not pushing, not yet, just resting there, like a brother's hand. And then the push. 7 stories, 7 seconds of sky, and Nathan standing at the bottom, watching me hit the ground, waiting 7 minutes before he called anyone. 7 minutes. I counted every one of them. I remembered my father's funeral. David Voss, the man who built a company with his bare hands, lowered into the ground while Nathan stood at the podium and gave a eulogy about family. Hannah sat in the back row, staring at nothing. She'd already figured out what she'd done. She would never recover. But here's what made Nathan more than a monster. Here's what made him tragic. I remembered him at 14, a kid in a school hallway, classmates calling him Voss's stray dog, and my father pulling up to the school, kneeling on the floor and hugging Nathan while he cried, because he wanted to believe he was truly a son, not a charity case, not a dead man's debt, just a son. David didn't adopt Nathan out of obligation. He adopted him because a boy was hurting and he couldn't walk away. There was a version of Nathan who could have been a real brother. That's what made the betrayal unbearable, not the evil, the waste. One night, alone in the company's basement archive, I searched through old project files, anything related to Nathan's early history at the firm. In a locked drawer at the back, I found a sealed folder, brown paper, yellowed with age, stamped confidential, D. Voss only, dated 15 years ago, the year of the crane construction collapse, the year Nathan's father died. I opened it, read the original accident investigation report. What did you do, Dad? What did you seal away in this folder? And why didn't you ever want anyone to find it? I locked the folder in my apartment safe. I didn't tell Sarah. This wasn't evidence for the gala. This was something else entirely. Something I'd hold until the right moment came. The next morning, I did something that had nothing to do with strategy. Something that was just about being a son. I asked my father to see a doctor. Dad, when was the last time you had a real checkup? Not a quick visit, a full one. Blood work, heart, the whole thing. You've been running this company for 30 years without stopping. I'd feel better knowing you're all right. He said he was fine. Said he'd been fine for 30 years. Said if he could lift steel beams at 25, he could handle a desk at 55. But I didn't laugh. because the last time I heard him say he was fine, I was standing at his grave 8 months later. He agreed. Results came back with early cardiac stress. The doctor prescribed medication and regular monitoring. I went to the pharmacy with him. I checked every bottle myself, compared the labels to the pills inside, checked the dosage stamps, the color, the shape, everything matched. At that point, I thought the only threat to my father was grief and overwork. I didn't know yet that Nathan was already 3 steps ahead of me on this one. That same week, I noticed something on Nathan's company calendar through my system access. A blocked evening with no meeting title, no attendees, no project code, just empty time from a man who filled every slot with company work. I followed him across town to a restaurant called Mercer and Vine. Through the window, Nathan sitting with 2 men in suits I recognized from my first life. Executives from Carver and Associates, the rival development firm that had absorbed half of Voss's contracts after the company collapsed. I walked in, took a table behind a wooden partition, placed my phone face down with the microphone aimed at his table. 23 minutes of Nathan's own voice, unmistakable, discussing leaked project timelines, bid strategies, and a VP position at Carver waiting for him after the transition. My third weapon for the gala, 3 pillars of evidence. 3 ways Nathan could never talk his way out. But Nathan was smarter than I wanted him to be. He'd noticed the board meeting stumble. He'd noticed David spending more time at the office. He'd noticed something different in the way I looked at him. Not hostility, but something worse. Awareness. He told Vivian that something was wrong, that I wasn't the same Aiden he expected, and he made a decision that would change everything. He accelerated his timeline. The forged embezzlement documents he'd planned to use against Hannah in 6 months, he was going to use them in weeks. The butterfly effect had begun. My predictions were no longer certainties, they were estimates, and estimates can be wrong. And they were wrong. Nathan moved 3 months ahead of schedule. One Tuesday evening, he sat down with Hannah in his office. Door closed, voice low, face heavy with manufactured concern, and slid a folder across the desk. He told her he'd found something. He told her he didn't want to believe it. Inside, doctored financial documents showing Aiden siphoning company funds, fake account numbers, fabricated transfer records. Every page designed to make my sister believe her brother was stealing from their father. Hannah told me later that for one terrible second, she almost believed it. The numbers looked real. Nathan's concern looked real. Everything about that moment was designed to feel real. But then she heard my voice in her head, a casual question over takeout that hadn't felt casual at all. Come to me first. She closed the folder. She thanked Nathan for bringing it to her. And that night, she knocked on my apartment door. Sit down. Look at this. Real financial records, side by side. These account numbers are wrong. The last 3 digits don't match any company account. These transfers are dated on a Saturday. Our bank doesn't process on weekends. And this signature? That's not even close to mine. It took her 90 seconds to see what Nathan had spent weeks preparing. The forgeries were obvious next to the truth. She stared at both sets of numbers, and something shifted behind her eyes. Not shock, but understanding. She said she wouldn't confront Nathan. She'd let him think it worked. In my first life, she brought these documents to the board. She testified against me in front of the entire company. It destroyed our family. This time, she trusted me. That trust was the most important thing I'd ever earn in either life. 3 weeks later, the Meridian Launch Gala, the biggest event in Voss development history. The waterfront project that was supposed to cement the company's legacy for the next decade. 200 guests, board members, investors, media, city officials. And Nathan, co-leading the event, preparing to take the stage and showcase his contributions to a project built on stolen work. The night before, Sarah and I sat in my apartment with every piece of evidence spread across the dining table. 3 pillars. Original project files with my timestamps, her sycamore designs with her metadata, and 23 minutes of Nathan's own voice recorded at Mercer and Vine. She triple-checked everything. Every file, every date, every metadata tag, while I watched her work with the kind of precision that made me understand why Nathan had stolen from her in the first place.
Your father is going to be in that room, Aiden. Front row, center seat. He's going to watch the boy he raised for 15 years get exposed in front of 200 people. Are you ready for what that does to him?
If I don't do this now, while every piece of evidence is ready and every witness is in that room, Nathan will do something worse, something I can't undo, and Dad won't survive it.
Then we do it clean. No rage, no drama, no accusations we can't back up with proof. If we make this personal, Nathan spins it as family drama and walks away untouched. 3 independent sources, 3 types of proof. We present it calmly, let the room reach their own conclusion, and make it undeniable.
She was right. If I made this personal, if I let anger turn it into a performance, Nathan could spin it as jealousy, family drama, a brother's grudge. But evidence doesn't have emotions. Timestamps don't hold grudges. And a recording of someone's own voice is impossible to deny. We went through the plan one final time. We checked every file one final time. And then we waited for tomorrow. The Meridian Gala, rooftop venue, 40th floor, overlooking the harbor, string lights strung between steel beams, champagne flutes catching the city light, a scale model of the waterfront development glowing under spotlights at the center of the room, 200 guests in tailored suits and evening dresses, and Nathan Voss, center stage, standing behind a podium with the confidence of a man who believed every lie he'd ever told. He presented a retrospective of his contributions to the Meridian, designs he'd stolen from Sarah, timelines he'd stolen from me, partnerships he'd built on information he'd leaked to competitors. The room applauded. Board members nodded. My father, front row, clapped with pride in his eyes for the son he'd chosen to love. The last time I would ever see that look on his face directed at Nathan, I stood up. 200 heads turned. The room went from polite applause to dead silence in the space of a single heartbeat, every eye tracking me as I walked toward the front.
Before we continue with tonight's celebration, there's something this room needs to see. Something that changes everything you think you know about the man standing behind that podium. Nathan's smile froze. I walked to the front and connected my laptop to the projector. 3 pillars of evidence. 3 ways Nathan could never talk his way out. First, original project files with creation timestamps, user IDs, and revision histories. Every technical specification Nathan had presented as his own work was authored by me months before he submitted it. Side-by-side comparisons filled the screen, his name on the submissions, my name buried in the metadata. The dates didn't lie. Second, Sarah stood up, 5 rows back. Steady hands, steady voice. She confirmed that the residential tower Nathan had presented as Project Sycamore was her design. Her floor plans, her structural specifications, her material calculations. Stolen and resubmitted under his name over a year ago.
That tower was my design. Every floor plan, every specification, every calculation. I reported the theft to HR over a year ago, and my complaint was deleted. Tonight, the evidence speaks for itself.
Third, I pressed play. Nathan's own voice filled the rooftop. 23 minutes of audio from Mercer and Vine. His voice discussing leaked project timelines and bid strategies with executives from Carver and Associates, a rival development firm. His voice negotiating a VP position after the transition. His own words, unmistakable. I watched Nathan's face as his voice played through the speakers. The charm dissolved second by second. The smile first, then the posture, then the light behind his eyes. By the time the recording ended, the man standing at the podium wasn't the Nathan anyone in this room had ever met. He was the real Nathan, the one only I had ever seen. The room went silent, the kind of silence that has weight. Nathan gripped the podium and said the only thing a cornered liar can say. These are doctored. Nobody moved. Nobody believed him. 3 independent evidence streams, 2 separate victims, 1 recorded confession. There was nothing left to doctor and nothing left to deny. Richard Enfield picked up his phone and called security. And my father, David Voss, front row, center seat, didn't move. He didn't stand. He didn't speak. He just stared at Nathan with a look I will never forget. The look of a man seeing someone for the very first time. Not the boy he'd raised. Not the brother he'd given to his sons. A stranger. A stranger wearing 15 years of his love like a costume. Security escorted Nathan through the lobby. 200 guests watched him walk past the scale model of the building he'd helped steal. As he passed me, the mask was gone. No charm, no warmth, no performance. Just raw fury compressed into a whisper. He leaned close and said 4 words. You think this is over? You think this is over. 4 words that told me everything I needed to know. Nathan wasn't finished. He'd lost his position, his reputation, his place in this family, but he was still free, still furious. And the one thing I'd learned about Nathan across 2 lifetimes, a cornered Nathan is more dangerous than a scheming one. Vivian had already disappeared. She'd slipped out the moment the recording started. A spy's instinct, a mercenary's math. When the numbers don't add up, you cut your losses and run. After the room cleared, I showed the board the rest. Photographs of Vivian and Nathan at the Linden Hotel. Timestamps across 3 separate visits. Lobby footage of them leaving together with his hand on her back. Hotel records obtained through the company's legal counsel. She wasn't a friend from university. She was his girlfriend, his spy, planted in my life to feed him every word I ever said. David went home in silence. Hannah rode with him. Neither of them spoke. I watched from the rooftop as their car pulled away. 2 taillights disappearing into the city, carrying the weight of everything that had just shattered. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to sit next to my father and tell him it would be all right. But what words exist for what he'd just learned? The boy you loved for 15 years, the boy you gave your name to, your home to, your heart to, wanted to destroy you. He wanted your company, your legacy, and eventually, your life. There are no words for that. So I stood on the rooftop alone and let the wind take everything I couldn't say. The weeks that followed should have been a victory. Nathan was gone. The company was safe. My sister was standing, but my father was fading. David was tired all the time, breathless after climbing stairs, poor color in his face, sleeping in his office chair between meetings. I told myself it was stress, grief, the emotional weight of learning that the boy he'd loved for 15 years had been trying to destroy him. Just like I told myself in my first life. I was wrong then, and I was wrong now. Sarah came over one evening. Dinner at the Voss house, my idea. Something small to make the place feel less empty. She was helping clear the table when she picked up a medication bottle from the kitchen counter. She held it up to the light, turned it in her hand, and went very still.
Aiden, come here. Look at this. The label says 50 milligrams, but these pill markings say 10, and the color is wrong. This isn't the same compound at all. Someone switched your father's medication, and whoever did it was counting on no one in this house looking closely enough to notice.
The floor dropped out from under me. I took the bottle from her hands and looked. She was right. The label said one thing. The pills said something else entirely. Different dosage, different markings, different color. Nathan had switched them. Not after the gala, but before it, during his regular visits to the house. Between the week Dad started his medication and the night of the gala. The wrong pills had been sitting in that cabinet for weeks. Nathan was gone, but his quiet poison was still working. In my first life, my father died of a heart attack. I thought grief killed him. I thought Nathan broke his spirit and his body simply followed. I was wrong. Nathan was killing him. Plan C, slow medication tampering, a death that would look natural to everyone. I didn't know this plan existed because Plan A killed me first. I never lived long enough to see Plan C in motion. I drove Dad to the hospital that night. Tampering confirmed. The damage was early stage, reversible. He would live. I quietly replaced the medication and informed the doctor, but I didn't tell David what I'd found. If he confronted Nathan, Nathan would know his last weapon had been disarmed. And a man with nothing left to lose and nothing left to hide is a man I couldn't predict anymore. My foreknowledge was nearly empty. I couldn't afford to be wrong again. The person I'd ignored in my first life had just saved the person I loved most in both of them. An architect reading a pill bottle like she reads blueprints caught the one thing the man who came back from the dead missed completely. A few days later, with Dad resting and recovering, I took Sarah somewhere I'd never taken anyone. The Meridian construction site, half-built tower, open floors with exposed steel beams reaching into empty sky, wind pulling at everything. The city spread below us, like a map of everything I'd almost lost. I stood near the edge, not too close, but close enough to feel it, the height, the openness, the kind of place where a man could fall and disappear.
You bring me to an unfinished building at 9 o'clock at night, 40 stories above the city, and you stand near the edge like you're looking for something you lost. What is this place to you, Aiden?
Somewhere I almost didn't come back from. A place that means something I can't explain. Not yet, maybe not ever, but I needed you to see it.
Why did you call me that first night? Out of everyone at the company, everyone in your life, why me?
Because in another version of my life, you were the only person who showed up for me at the end, and I didn't deserve it.
I don't completely understand what that means, but I think I feel it. You don't have to carry everything alone, Aiden.
I took her hand. I wanted to tell her everything. That I died, that I came back, that she was the last face I expected to matter, and the first one I needed. But some truths aren't meant to be spoken. They're meant to be shown. The wind pulled at our clothes, and the city hummed 40 stories below. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I wasn't falling. A few days later, Hannah came to see me. She sat on my couch with her legs crossed, staring at her hands, and said something that landed like a stone in still water. She said, "I almost believed those documents. I almost took them straight to the board, but you didn't. You closed that folder, and you walked out of that room, and you came to me. That's the version of you that's real, Hannah. That's the only one that matters." She looked at me with eyes that carried the weight of something she couldn't name. She said, "I almost did." Almost doesn't count. You had every reason to believe him, and you chose not to. That says more about who you are than anything Nathan ever tried to make you do. She didn't know that in another life, almost did count. In another version of this story, she walked into a board meeting with Nathan's forged evidence and testified against her own brother. She watched me lose everything. And after I died, after the truth finally surfaced, she carried that guilt until it hollowed her out from the inside. I would never tell her. That version of Hannah doesn't exist in this timeline. She doesn't need to know what she was capable of in a life that never happened. Some people say the truth should always come out. Maybe. But some truths are prisons, and loving someone means not locking them inside one. While my family healed, Nathan was unraveling. Cut off from the company, the family, everything he'd spent years building toward. Drinking, erratic, furious. But Nathan was never just angry. He was calculated, even in desperation. And he still had one thing no one had thought to take away: his old access codes to the Meridian construction site. A separate security system that HR never coordinated with site management during the chaos of his firing. If Nathan couldn't have the company, he would destroy its crown jewel, delete evidence from the servers, damage structural supports, burn it all. And I knew he would try something. I just didn't know when or how. My predictions were gone. My foreknowledge was empty. I was fighting blind now. Then the alert came. 2 a.m. My phone lit up with a single notification. Someone had just used Nathan's old credentials at the Meridian construction site. After the gala, I'd asked the site security manager to flag those credentials instead of deleting them. Standard practice. You don't erase revoked access. You trap it. If Nathan ever tried to use them, I'd know instantly. A precaution that took 2 minutes to set up. He came a day early. The butterfly effect. One last time. Even my estimates were wrong now. Nathan's at the site. Call the police. Tell them the Meridian. Someone breaking in with revoked credentials. Stay where you are.
Wait for the police, Aiden. Please. You said it yourself. A man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous version of Nathan there is. You don't know what he'll do when he's cornered. Don't go alone.
If he destroys the servers, we lose evidence. If he damages the structure, workers arrive in 6 hours. I can't wait. I drove across the city in the dark. The Meridian Tower rose against the sky. Half built, half lit, emergency lights casting everything in orange and shadow. The kind of place where a man could fall 7 stories and disappear. The kind of place where I did. I found Nathan in the site office, hunched over a terminal, deleting files. He heard me before he saw me. He didn't run. He straightened up and we stood there, 10 feet of concrete between 2 brothers who were never really brothers, standing in the skeleton of a building that neither of us might walk out of. We walked onto the open floor, scaffolding, exposed steel beams. The city sprawled 40 stories below, glittering and indifferent, wind pulling at everything. He asked me how I knew, how I always seemed one step ahead, from the very first day. I've seen how this story ends, Nathan. I've seen every version of what happens next. Every move you make, every lie you tell, every person you hurt on your way down, and I didn't like the ending, so I wrote a new one. Nathan stood at the edge, not like he was going to jump, like he was standing at the edge of everything he'd ever been. The charm was completely gone. No mask, no performance, no strategy. Just a man who'd spent 15 years nursing a wound and watched it destroy everything it was supposed to justify. He said, "I deserved it. Your father took everything from mine and called it charity. Every birthday, every holiday, I sat at that table and watched him look at you and Hannah the way he never looked at me. I was never his son. I was his guilt. I was the reminder of what he owed, and he kept me close so he wouldn't have to feel ashamed of forgetting. You were his son, Nathan. Not a charity case, not a debt, his son. He chose you. He gave you his name, his home, his family. He loved you, and it was real." He shook his head slowly, the way a man does when he's heard something so many times it's lost all meaning. Not enough. It was never enough, and you know it. It was never going to be enough. That was never about how much he loved you, Nathan. The problem was that you decided it wasn't enough, before he ever had a chance to prove it was. Police lights appeared below, blue and red, sweeping across the half-built floors like slow heartbeats. Nathan watched them come. He didn't fight. He didn't run. There was nothing left to pretend. 3 days later, I visited Nathan in custody. Bare room, metal table, fluorescent light humming overhead. The kind of room where silence has weight and everything you've ever done sits in the chair across from you. He looked at me from across that metal table, unshaven, hollow, stripped of every mask he'd ever worn, and said, "Why are you here? You won. You took everything. So what is this? You came to gloat? To give you something. Something my father kept sealed for 15 years because he loved you too much to let you see it. But you burned that protection down when you tried to destroy everything he built." I slid a folder across the table. Brown paper, yellowed with age, the sealed stamp still visible. Confidential, D. Voss only, dated 15 years ago. The folder I'd found in the basement archive and kept locked in my apartment safe, waiting for exactly this moment. Inside, the original accident investigation report from the crane construction collapse, signed by 3 independent parties: site inspector, structural engineer, investigating officer, government filing stamp. 15 years of truth, sealed in paper and silence. And the truth Nathan had never known. His father, Robert Crane, didn't die as a hero. Robert had been falsifying safety inspection reports, cutting corners on structural reinforcement, pocketing the difference. The collapse that killed him, the collapse Nathan had built his entire identity around, was caused by Robert's own negligence. 3 other workers died that day. My father David wasn't saved by Robert's sacrifice. David was injured in the collapse Robert caused. And David covered it up. He sealed the report. He paid the other families with NDAs. And he took in Nathan, not because Robert was a hero, not because he owed a dead man's debt, but because a 13-year-old boy didn't deserve to carry his father's shame. David gave Nathan his name, his home, his company. 15 years of love, not out of guilt, out of choice. Nathan read the report, page by page, his hands trembling harder with each line, the sealed stamp and 3 independent signatures staring back at him like witnesses he couldn't cross-examine. He looked up and said, "This is a lie. It has to be. Your father caused the collapse. Mine covered it up so you'd never carry that shame. He gave you his name, his home. 15 years of love, not because he owed you, because he chose to. And this is what you did with it." Nathan's identity collapsed in that room. The hero's son, the one they owed. Every resentment, every scheme, every justification he'd ever built, rested on a foundation that never existed. His father wasn't a martyr. His father was the reason 3 men never came home. And the man Nathan spent years trying to destroy was the man who had protected him from that truth his entire life. He didn't rage. Something behind his eyes went dark. Not anger, but something deeper. The sound of a story ending. The police had the tampered medication as evidence, too. Nathan would face attempted murder charges, corporate fraud, espionage, and obstruction. Everything. But that wasn't the real punishment. The punishment was the folder. The punishment was knowing. I walked out of the custody building into daylight. Real daylight. Morning sun cutting through the trees. Warm on my face. Exactly like the morning I'd woken up in my apartment what felt like a lifetime ago. And Sarah was there, leaning against her car in the parking lot. She saw my face, whatever was written on it, and she didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to.
It's over, Aiden. Whatever you've been carrying, whatever you've been fighting, it's over. You can put it down now.
In my first life, I walked out of a construction site in a body bag. This time, I walked out into sunlight, and she was there. I held her, and for the first time in 2 lifetimes, she was right. It was over. David recovered, slowly, stubbornly, the way he'd built everything in his life. Within a month, he was back at the office in work boots, arguing with contractors and reviewing blueprints like he'd never left. Hannah brought him coffee every morning. She'd started interning at Voss Development, not invisible anymore, not overshadowed, finding her own place, on her own terms. And Sarah was promoted to lead architect on the Meridian project, her name on the designs, her name on the building. Finally, Vivian resurfaced 2 weeks later, through lawyers, not in person. She offered to testify against Nathan in exchange for immunity. I handed it to the legal team. Whether to accept a snake's help to cage another snake, that wasn't my call to make anymore. Some of you will say, take the deal. Some of you will say, never trust her. I'll leave that one with you. I used to think I came back to stop Nathan, to save my father, to protect my family, and I did all of those things. But that wasn't what this was really about. I came back to see the people I'd been blind to my whole life. The father who loved quietly and never once asked for credit. The sister who just needed someone to notice she was in the room. And the girl who stood at my grave every single week when no one else did, whispering that she was sorry she wasn't braver. In my first life, I had everything and saw nothing. This time, I opened my eyes.